All right. So as I was saying, the Orthoptera order of insects includes things like the grasshoppers, very, very important agricultural pest. It also includes things like katydids and crickets. Crickets are really common around here, although I don't hear too much about them being a problem. You hear them at night on wonderful spring or summer days. They are common in certain areas. They can get into certain food stores. They are certainly a pest in certain house situations. They can get into things, but uh, in this area, I haven't heard too much problem with crickets from the ag industry. The Mantidea, the mantids, um, they have a unique ability to turn their head. Look at this guy looking at you. That is unique in the insect world. The Mantidea can do this, but other insects, they have limited movement up and down, maybe a little left to right, but they can't twist and turn their head and look. But the Mantidea, they can, but they are extremely patient, very lightning fast, good hunters. And they are also cannibalistic. They'll eat their own kind. The Blattaria, everybody's favorite, the cockroach, um, very important pest. Lots of different cockroaches that come from different parts of the world. Um, Again, not going to get into the details here. Isoptera, the termites, got to deal with that at my house. I know I have some termites. Talk to somebody about it, but they're sometimes called white ants. They are not ants. They're not even in the same insect order, but they certainly have some general resemblance. But termites generally eat wood, and they don't actually eat wood. They chew wood, and the bacteria in their stomach actually digest it. Kind of like cows. Cows don't eat grass. Cows are giant grass chewing machines. And most of the nutrients from the grass is released by the bacteria in their stomach. And they are ruminants, so they have multiple stomachs, and they kind of move this wad of cellulose material that's being digested by bacteria and chew it again. And uh, the bacteria do the heavy lifting. Anyway, Isoptera, bacteria in their stomach helps them use the wood nutrients or get nutrients out of the wood and energy out of the wood that they eat. As I mentioned, termites are sometimes called white ants, but are not ants. And don't worry about this table. This is a comparison of true ants, Hymenoptera, related to bees and wasps, versus the termites, Isoptera. Hemiptera, the true bugs, the ones that only can be called bugs from a scientific standpoint. And again, don't worry about the detailed parts and the material here. I'm just giving you some examples. Wheel bugs, a true bug that is a hunter, one of the good guys. The wheel bugs are the good guys, whereas the squash bug in the lower right-hand corner is one of the bad guys. Hemiptera, suborder Homoptera, a very important insect order because it includes things like aphids, huge agricultural pest, leafhoppers, another huge agricultural pest, and depending on where you are, cicadas, another one that can be a huge pest in some areas, not here, but cicadas can be a massive problem, and scale insects for certain types of permanent crops, especially the perennial crops can get scale. Just some examples. Hemiptera also has a suborder of an important agricultural pest, the whitefly. Huge reproductive rates, and they can suck the life right out of your plants. The biggest places I've had problems with whiteflies over the years is in greenhouses. And with some of the greenhouse production I've done in tomatoes and lettuce seed breeding programs, whitefly can be a real problem in this area and just about anywhere in California I've ever been. Here are the periodic cicadas. The one thing I want to mention is the nymphs. The way their reproductive cycle works, they come out once every 13 or 17 years. And 13 and 17 are prime numbers. So they're not divisible by any other number. So to have some sort of a pattern of reproduction for the predator animals, birds that might eat them, or some other predator animal that might eat them, is almost statistically impossible to have a predator that can follow a prey that reproduces on a prime number pattern. And so it's very successful. And so when the periodic cicadas emerge, they come out in massive numbers, and there's way too many of them for all of the birds to eat and other predators to eat. So birds and lizards and other kinds of predators are just fat and happy and just having a great year, going, this is great. I got all this food to eat, and they're happy, but there's still plenty of cicadas left over to do serious damage to your crops. And I've heard sometimes the cicada as the culprit of the biblical locusts, but my understanding is that they have a similar reputation, but the true biblical locusts are members of the grasshopper order. Aphids, again, something very important, the cornicles. You don't need to memorize that, but if you are working with aphids as one of your pest problems, you probably are learning about cornicles because they are an important identifying characteristic when trying to tell what species you have. Scale insects, another very critical pest in some crops. Neuropoda, the lacewings, one of the good guys. The lacewings, the Dobson flies and antlions, they're hunters. You want these around. They keep a good balance in the environment. So if you have a healthy balance of good guys, bad guys, and intermediate irrelevant insects living in the community of your home or fields, the Neuroptera are some of the ones that are beneficials that you would want. Coleoptera, the beetles, the biggest group of any organism on Earth, the biggest order of any plant, animal, doesn't matter. Coleoptera is the king of diversity, the most species known. The largest insect order, yes, but also the largest order of any living thing. And there are lots of different kinds of beetles for all sorts of different ecological niches, and there's a beetle to eat every crop. So just some of the beetles. Grubs are the larvae of beetles, and some people consider them a delicacy. Grubs are edible, nutritious, not exactly on my top 10 list of dinner tonight, but hey. Fireflies are actually not flies, they are beetles, and they have a phosphorescent material that they accumulate in their abdomens, and they can cause it to glow. And that's why they call them fireflies. They do fly, and they do have a nighttime glow. And there are other phosphorescent organisms like glowworms and various kinds of algae, and a different type of glowing, not a phosphorescence, but what do they call it? Anyway, scorpions have a glowing capability. When you shine certain lights on them, they will fluoresce. And one of our favorites of the good guys, one of the most popular of the good guys, is the ladybug or lady beetle. And not all within this family are necessarily always good guys, but the adults, the eggs, the larvae look like these little black and white striped or black with orange spot, not black and white, black and orange striped or spotted larvae. Very distinct looking, but a lot of people don't realize what they're looking at when they find them. These are just larvae of the ladybugs. And the ladybug or lady beetle is actually most beneficial in the larval stage. They eat and eat and eat, and they can eat a lot of aphids. Then they pupate, where they're non-mobile and vulnerable. And after a short pupation period, they come out as the adults. There can be some pests in the lady beetle family as well. Not all of them just eat aphids and other potentially harmful insects. Some of them in the same family might eat plants. Oops. Diptera are the flies and mosquitoes. You can see here they're pointing at these special modified wing structures called halters. And these modified wing structures are like little weights, and they can swing those weights to manipulate midair acrobatics in a tremendous way. Anybody who's ever tried to swat a fly out of the air knows what I'm talking about. Flies are aerobatic geniuses. They are really, really good at aerobatic tricks. And it's because largely of those halters that allow them to make incredible turns and twists in flight. And even during takeoff, they are extremely elusive. Here's the mosquito and fruit flies, different types of Diptera, all related to the flies. Notice it says female. The proboscis, the ones that suck blood, are the females. So it's not my fault that the females are the blood-sucking members of the group. Deer fly, horse flies, blowflies, house flies, lots and lots of different types of flies. Hoverflies are flies that look like or mimic bees. And to their benefit is they're not likely to get eaten by certain predators because the predators don't want to get stung, and they look enough like a bee or a wasp that they're left alone. And they also behave like a bee or wasp, eating nectar of the flowers, and they are also pollinators, just not in enough numbers to be a significant pollinator for crops or anything, but they are in a very interesting niche where they will act like and look like bees enough to keep from being eaten. One of the huge insect orders of importance is Lepidoptera, the moths and butterflies. And there's just so many of them that are important. And it's not the adults that are the problem, except the adults are laying eggs. It's the larvae. The larvae are the ones that are chewing and eating and doing things that are harmful to crops. And so some of them are beautiful, like the swallowtails or the monarchs. Some of them a little more plain, some of them quite damaging to crops. Here's another example of mimicry. You can see the viceroy versus the monarch. The monarch is bigger, and the monarch doesn't have this stripe dividing the hind wing into two parts. This stripe on the hind wing is a telltale giveaway you're looking at a viceroy, not a monarch. They're also a little more dull, a little smaller. The black of the body is a little less intense, but they're close enough that it adds protection. The food of the monarch butterfly accumulates a toxin in their bodies that is toxic to birds. And so birds that like to eat moths and butterflies leave the monarchs largely alone because it's not good. They might poison themselves. And so monarchs kind of get a free pass. And the viceroys take advantage of that by looking just enough like a monarch that The predators leave them alone. Silkworm moths, hawk moths. Silkworm are used for making silk. When they make their cocoons to pupate, the larvae make their, or actually, yeah, cocoon. When the larvae use their silk threads to make a cocoon and pupate, that silk is prized. And so that silk will be collected, their cocoons will be collected and processed and spun into thread to make very valuable fabrics, silk. Hymenoptera, a combination of mostly good guys and sometimes bad guys. The bees, wasps, and ants. And many of them are predatory or parasitic, so they can attack and eat some other insects, keeping populations in check, and they can lay their eggs in other insects and lay eggs in the eggs of other insects. So they're parasites, and they pollinate our crops, hugely important in pollination and beneficial control. But sometimes we don't like them, like the yellow jackets when they show up to our picnic, or the paper wasps when they sting us or something. But most wasps actually are harmless to humans. They're not harmless to other insects. Velvet ants, these are actually quite large compared to most ants. They can be 3/8 of an inch, maybe even a 1/2 of an inch long in some cases, perhaps. And you can see the color. They can be orangish, reddish, rusty, almost a purplish color. And they tend to be very solitary. I've seen a couple of them in Monterey County up in Prunedale, but I haven't seen too many of them in this county. But every once in a while I run across one. Relatively insignificant in terms of the importance to agriculture, but they're interesting just because they're such a beautiful looking ant. And other types of ants, they can do some problems like the carpenter ants, just like the termites. Carpenter ants can eat the wood in your house. They can do more damage to houses than termites in many cases, and can be harder to control. And we have lots of carpenter ants, not here, but in the Central Valley areas of California. It can be a real problem. If you ever see some weird dust showing up, kind of a coarse dust, take it seriously. There are different patterns of this dust that's produced by termites or carpenter ants. A dichotomous key. Dichotomous, di meaning two, so you always split things into two. And that's how taxonomists divide things. It either has exposed mouthparts or not, concealed. Exposed or concealed. And then if it is concealed, it either is wingless or winged, which they don't show there. If it's exposed, it is either wingless or winged. If it's wingless exposed mouthparts, it's a silverfish. If it's winged, well, the wings can or can't flex over the body. If they can't, it's a dragonfly. If it can, you still have to keep going. Well, it either is gradual metamorphosis or complete metamorphosis. If it's gradual, it's cockroaches or cicadas. If it's complete, it's beetles and butterflies. So again, this is an extremely tiny dichotomous key to illustrate how you would identify a few of the things that were presented in this slideshow. And if it were a real dichotomous key, I've got a plant dichotomous key for the plants of California. And it's a book with very thin pages that is about 4 inches thick. Incredibly detailed dichotomous key to drill down to every species of native California plant that was known back when that was printed, 1981 or whenever that book was printed. There are about 31 insect orders in total, And remember, each of those 31 orders has a bunch of families. Each of the families has a bunch of genera, the genus. And each of those genera has a bunch of species. So it explodes into many, 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 many species of insects. And what are those major insect orders? These are the ones you need to know. And I've already given you this on the previous presentation, but I want you to know Coleoptera, Diptera, Hemiptera, suborder Heteroptera, Hemiptera, suborder Homoptera, the Hymenoptera, Lepidoptera, Orthoptera, and Thysanoptera. So 8 different groups. All right, that's it. Out of the 31 orders, I want you to know 7 orders, and in one of them, I want you to know 2 suborders. That's it.